Imagine being on the battlefield of ancient Rome. The clash of swords, the war cries, the deafening sound of marching legions. But among the soldiers, a brutal force charges forward without fear. War dogs, trained to fight until their last breath. They weren't just companions to the soldiers. They were living weapons, lethal and loyal. How were they trained? What breeds were used? And what impact did these four-legged warriors have on Roman history? Get ready to uncover incredible stories of courage and loyalty that made these dogs true legends on the battlefield. In a vibrant and challenging Rome, dogs were far more than mere pets. They were valuable partners who accompanied the Romans in their daily activities, playing crucial roles both in domestic life and in military operations. While the nobility took pride in their small and elegant companion dogs, the lower classes, such as peasants and soldiers, saw their dogs as essential allies for survival, protection, and success. In ancient Rome, the bond between humans and dogs went beyond mere affection. These animals were constant companions, whether protecting property from invaders, hunting in the vast lands surrounding the cities, or, in more extreme situations, engaging in bloody battles. To the Romans, a faithful dog was a symbol of unwavering loyalty, a quality that directly aligned with the military and security needs of the empire. The streets of Rome and Pompeii were filled with dogs of all sizes and types. Among wealthy families, it was common to find small, delicate dogs that symbolized status and beauty, serving more as companions than as protectors. Meanwhile, in rural areas or among soldiers, larger and more robust dogs were indispensable for guarding property and aiding in the hunt. The sound of a dog's paws running along hunting trails, or the distant barking echoing from Roman farms, was as familiar as the sound of soldiers' boots marching to war. However, a dog's role wasn't limited to the home or the hunt. In Roman military camps, dogs were a vital extension of the defense strategy. Their intelligence, strength, and tracking abilities made them unbeatable allies. It wasn't uncommon for these dogs to accompany the Romans on their campaigns, helping to secure camps at night and track enemy movements at dawn. On the battlefield, their bravery matched that of Roman soldiers, and their loyalty to the imperial cause was unparalleled. They became an extension of Rome's military force, turning fear into confidence for both allies and enemies. This relationship was built on mutual trust. The Romans knew that these animals not only protected their property and lives, but also represented the strength, vigilance, and courage that defined Roman character. In fact, dogs became an essential part of the social and military fabric of ancient Rome, deeply embedded in its history. Now, come with me as we explore how these dogs played such a significant role in everyday Roman life, with their unbreakable loyalty, leaving their mark on the streets and in the heart of the city, protecting everyone from the bravest soldiers to the most noble families. Walking through the bustling streets of Rome, or the quiet villages of the empire, one would easily spot dogs of all shapes and sizes accompanying their owners at nearly every moment of the day. They were everywhere, like faithful shadows of the Romans, whether on battlefields or in the bustling marketplaces. In major cities like Rome and Pompeii, small and elegant dogs with well-groomed coats were often seen beside high society women. These dogs, known for their gentleness, became status symbols, treated with the same dignity and care that noble Romans gave to their own children. Among Roman soldiers, dogs played an equally important role. In the vast Roman territories, where battles and skirmishes were constant, dogs were used to guard military camps, track enemies, and even deliver messages. On the quiet nights around military encampments, dogs patrolled tirelessly, alerting soldiers to any suspicious movements. Their presence provided a sense of security, allowing Roman troops to rest without the constant fear of an enemy ambush. In many mosaics and sculptures found in the ruins of Roman cities, dogs are frequently depicted as an integral part of daily life. A famous example is the Pompeii mosaic with the inscription Cave Canem, beware of the dog, warning visitors of the presence of a fierce guard dog. This simple yet powerful reminder of dogs' role in Roman life highlights how much they were valued and how their loyalty was considered a vital defense against intruders and threats. Moreover, the bond between Romans and their dogs was celebrated in art and literature. Poets and writers of the time often mentioned dogs' dedication, associating them with loyalty and courage, virtues highly esteemed by the Romans. In a military context, having dogs alongside soldiers wasn't just about security. It was also a matter of honor and pride. As we delve deeper into the streets of ancient Rome, we can see how dogs were woven into Roman life, not just as pets but as symbols of protection, courage, and loyalty that spread across every corner of the empire. They were more than companions. They were silent heroes, leaving their paw prints in Rome's history. In the Roman military scene, where organization, discipline, and strength were crucial for success, dogs stood out as indispensable strategic allies. For the Romans, war wasn't just about swords, spears, and armor. Dogs were an essential part of their forces, a silent yet immensely valuable component. When the legions marched into battle, it wasn't uncommon for dogs to accompany them, bringing unique skills that could mean the difference between victory and defeat. Dogs were present during military marches, protecting encampments and ensuring the soldiers' safety at night. On the battlefield, their usefulness went far beyond mere defense. Trained to track enemies, detect spies, and sense even the slightest movement, these animals had an olfactory sensitivity far superior to that of humans, capable of detecting even the most subtle signs of an enemy ambush. In critical moments when legions needed quick communication, dogs were used as messengers, carrying orders between different military units or crossing treacherous terrain. These dogs proved to be faster and more reliable than any human messenger. During wartime, when communication had to be swift and precise, these dogs became unsung heroes, ensuring that generals' orders reached their destinations without the risk of interception. Additionally, dogs played a role in attack strategies. Their presence on the battlefield created immense confusion among enemy ranks. The sight of strong, fierce dogs charging alongside Roman soldiers, barking and baring their sharp teeth, was enough to shake opposing forces, causing panic and disorder. Dogs like the canis pugnax, trained for precise attacks, became one of the most feared weapons in Rome's arsenal. Within Roman fortifications and camps, where vigilance was key to survival, dogs were more than just guard animals. Their ability to detect distant sounds and unusual movements made them ideal sentinels. During the night, when soldiers were at their most vulnerable, dogs' loyalty was put to the test time and time again. They patrolled tirelessly, and at the first sign of danger, they were ready to alert their masters, or even hurl themselves at intruders without hesitation. In reality, war dogs were not just trained animals, they were members of the legion, with defined roles and important functions. Many historical accounts, though rare, mention dogs receiving honors in battle, with soldiers paying tribute to these animals for their courage and dedication. Just like their owners, these dogs were considered warriors, and their presence became a hallmark of the Roman legions. For Rome, war was not just a matter of human strength. It was also a battlefield where the partnership with these extraordinary animals played a crucial role in the military strategy that helped secure the empire's dominance. Reflecting on the importance of dogs to the legions, it becomes clear that they were not mere pets but rather four-legged soldiers whose actions helped shape the Roman Empire. They were more than instruments of war. They were unsung heroes, whose loyalty and bravery became etched into Rome's military history. In ancient Rome, where honor and loyalty were deeply valued concepts, dogs were not just seen as companions, but as true heroes. Their presence in battles and daily struggles earned them recognition that many other living beings never experienced. To the Romans, a dog's loyalty was comparable to that of their own soldiers, unwavering and tireless. It was not uncommon to see Romans paying tribute to these brave animals, acknowledging their crucial role not just as guardians, but as symbols of bravery and devotion. When a dog stood out for its courage in combat or its role in defending a Roman's property, its loyalty did not go unnoticed. On the contrary, it was often celebrated in grand fashion. Some dogs that died in battle or during guard duty were buried with military honors, as if they were fallen soldiers. These burial ceremonies were carried out with respect, and the graves of these dogs were often marked with inscriptions expressing the Romans' gratitude and admiration for their loyal companions. A remarkable example of the reverence given to these dogs can be found in tombstones and inscriptions engraved on their graves. Archaeologists have discovered numerous funerary stones honoring dogs with moving epitaphs, such as, "Here lies the faithful guardian, who never abandoned his post." These records were not mere markers of mourning, but evidence of a profound emotional bond between the Romans and their dogs. The bravery of these animals was celebrated with the same intensity as the feats of human warriors, reflecting the Romans' deep respect for any being that demonstrated fidelity and courage in moments of danger. The value of a dog to its Roman owner went beyond simple affection. It was considered an extension of its master, a symbol of status and virtue. In the military field, a dog's loyalty was a reflection of the soldier's own character, his commitment to the empire's security, his readiness for battle, and his willingness to fight alongside his commander. When a dog fulfilled its mission with bravery, it became a hero, worthy of the same honors and remembrance as a Roman soldier. Even outside the battlefield, dogs were recognized for their significance in Roman society. They were not just pets but beings with purpose, whose actions demonstrated the virtues that Romans so highly valued. Some dogs were so revered that Romans even dedicated temples and statues to them as a way of exalting their qualities. For this reason, the presence of a dog in a Roman family or on the battlefield was a symbol of strength, loyalty, and respect. The reverent treatment given to dogs in Rome reveals the deep bond between Romans and their animals. It was not merely a matter of utility, but a true celebration of the loyalty and courage these dogs demonstrated, reflecting a philosophy of life that the Romans respected in both their soldiers and their canine companions. In the shadows of Rome's military might, where war strategies were meticulously crafted, there was one tactic that stood out for its brutality and efficiency: the use of dogs as weapons of intimidation. For the Romans, war was as much about strategy as it was about psychology. When facing an enemy, the empire knew that instilling fear and disorganization in the opposing ranks was one of the most effective ways to weaken morale before a single blow was struck. Imagine the scene. On the battlefield, in the distance, a line of massive dogs clad in leather and metal armor. Their imposing size and dark coats made them appear even more menacing. The Roman troops, already renowned for their discipline, advanced with the might of their legion, but they were accompanied by these fearsome dogs, ready for action. The presence of these giant and fierce animals was enough to provoke hesitation and fear in the enemy ranks. Before swords and spears even clashed, the Romans would unleash the dogs as a prelude to combat. These creatures would charge furiously at the opposing forces, breaking through their formations with a single objective: to sow chaos. The deafening sound of barking and the sight of sharp teeth cutting through the air created a scene of absolute panic. It was a calculated psychological tactic designed to destabilize the enemy, forcing them to react with fear, lose their formation, and fight in a disorganized manner. The power of a canine attack lay not only in their physical strength, but also in their ability to shatter the opponent's confidence. Enemy troops, upon seeing these armored dogs, often hesitated. How could one not be intimidated by a fierce animal capable of knocking down soldiers and cavalry alike, with a bite as powerful as a sword strike? The sight of these dogs charging forward was a stark reminder that Rome would stop at nothing to ensure victory, even using animals as instruments of war. Beyond serving as agents of panic on the battlefield, dogs were also deployed for strategic attacks. They were released at the start of combat to break enemy lines, creating openings for Roman soldiers to advance and strike with greater ease. It was a form of psychological pressure. The idea was that enemies, already terrified by the dogs and unsure of what to expect next, would scatter or fall into despair, giving the Romans a critical advantage. The effectiveness of this tactic was observed in several historical battles, where the mere use of dogs as instruments of intimidation caused enemies to lose their composure and discipline, two essential factors for military victory. While the combat prowess of the Roman legions was undeniable, Rome's ability to manipulate fear and chaos was one of its greatest strengths, and dogs played a vital role in this psychological warfare. By employing dogs in this way, the Romans not only reinforced their reputation as an unstoppable empire, but also demonstrated their mastery in controlling every aspect of warfare, even the most unexpected ones. When the legions marched onto the battlefield, it was not just the sound of swords and shields that echoed through the air, but also the fear that spread with the arrival of the dogs, ready to crush the morale of any army that dared oppose the greatness of Rome. In Roman battles, where precision and strategy were fundamental, dogs played a crucial role that went beyond mere intimidation. They were not just instruments of fear, but skilled and effective combat soldiers. Under the command of legates and centurions, these dogs were trained with the same discipline as the Roman legions, and their presence on the battlefield made a significant difference, both in tactics and in the outcome of the fight. As the battle began, the sound of trumpets rang out, and the Roman legions advanced with their rigid, disciplined formation. But right behind them, a line of massive dogs clad in leather armor emerged, ready to attack with unexpected ferocity. When enemy lines were broken by force and panic, the dogs entered the fray, showcasing their tactical prowess. One of the main objectives of dogs during combat was to attack enemy knights, who were often the elite of the opposing forces. When a knight rode confidently on his steed, he didn't expect to be knocked off by a fierce dog that, with agility and strength, would target the horse's legs. The dog's powerful bite, combined with its speed, caused a devastating impact. The horse would fall, and the knight, unbalanced and vulnerable, would be forced to fight on the ground, a much more difficult and dangerous position. This type of targeted attack was a clever tactic used by the Romans to destabilize enemy cavalry, weakening one of the most powerful forces on the battlefield. But dogs weren't just used against knights. During combat, when confusion and chaos took over, they became relentless predators, chasing down fleeing enemy soldiers. One of the dog's roles was to track and pursue those trying to escape, preventing the enemy from regrouping or retreating to a safer position. This tireless behavior of the dogs created a sense of despair in the adversaries, who knew that even in flight, they would still be hunted. For the Romans, this type of battlefield control, which prevented any chance of escape for the enemy, was essential to ensure a complete and decisive victory. Moreover, dogs were a vital line of defense during sieges. When the Roman legions surrounded an enemy in their camps or fortifications, the dogs acted as sentinels, patrolling and ensuring no one dared approach. Even on the quietest nights, when the Roman soldiers rested, the dogs stayed alert, watching the camp's perimeter. Any suspicious movement or strange sound was immediately detected, and the dogs, ready to attack, would alert the soldiers and protect the camp from potential enemy surprises. These tactics demonstrated how valuable dogs were to the Romans, not only as companions, but as essential tools of war. In an empire that prided itself on the organization and efficiency of its legions, dogs stood out for their loyalty and exceptional abilities, playing a crucial role in Roman victories. On a battlefield full of soldiers and war machines, Roman dogs became a silent yet deadly force, making all the difference between victory and defeat. Rome's history is filled with cultural exchanges and innovations that emerged throughout its empire. One of the most notable influences came from Greece, one of Rome's greatest rivals, and at the same time, one of its greatest teachers. Greek culture, with its philosophy, art, and military strategies, profoundly shaped the Roman Empire, and this extended to the breeding and training of war dogs. The Romans, known for their ability to adapt and improve upon what they learned from others, looked to the Greeks when seeking to perfect their own military tactics. It was among the Greeks that the Romans found the prototype of the war dog, the molossers, a robust and imposing breed famous for its physical strength and loyalty. Originally bred in the Epirus region of northern Greece, these dogs were used both for guarding and in battles. But the Romans, always attuned to the military potential of any element, saw in the molossers a true weapon for their military campaigns. The Greeks, under the leadership of Alexander the Great, had used these combat dogs against war elephants, considered one of the most feared forces in antiquity. The molossers were incredibly effective on the battlefield due to their strength and ability to face large opponents. They attacked in coordinated groups, destabilizing enemies with their fierce bite and group tactics. This observation did not go unnoticed by the Romans, who, knowing the value of learning from the best, decided to use these dogs in their own campaigns. However, the Romans didn't settle for simply imitating the Greeks. They took the molossers as a starting point and began making a series of modifications to create a dog that would better suit their military needs. With a keen focus on warfare, discipline, and effectiveness, the Romans started to genetically improve the dogs, selecting only the strongest, fastest, and most obedient to serve in combat. From this adaptation came the famous canis pugnax, the Roman war dog. But what many didn't know was that behind this formidable animal was the shadow of Greek influence. The way the Romans selected, trained, and utilized their war dogs was not just a reflection of their own ingenuity, but also a tribute to what they had learned from the Greeks, who had shown with their molossers that war could be fought not only with swords and shields, but also with ferocity and animal loyalty. The Romans, like their Greek predecessors, understood that war was as much about psychological control as it was about brute force. And by looking at Greek dogs, they saw not just a combat tool, but a symbol of power, loyalty, and strategy, values deeply embedded in the Roman spirit. And as the Roman Empire advanced over foreign lands, spreading its legions and culture, the canis pugnax followed in its footsteps, reminding everyone that in the great theater of war, even animals could be the most loyal and devastating allies. On the battlefields, where brute strength and the ability to adapt were the keys to success, the Romans knew they needed something more than just human warriors. The Roman Empire was in constant expansion, and to maintain its military supremacy, they needed a war dog that was unbeatable, strong, and loyal. The search for such an animal led to the creation of one of the most formidable dog breeds in history, the canis pugnax. The foundation of this creation began with the Romans' admiration for the Greek molossers, large, powerful, and relentless in combat. However, the Romans had a different vision, a unique approach to ensure that the new war dog would be even more adaptable and effective for their empire. They didn't just want a big, fierce dog. They wanted one capable of keeping up with the legions over long distances, a dog with agility, strength, and discipline. To achieve this, the Romans began carefully selecting the best molossers, seeking the most robust, fastest, and most obedient specimens. The breeding process was meticulous. Each generation of dogs was rigorously tested and selected, with a particular emphasis on their ability to follow commands in combat. It was vital that the canis pugnax not only be a war machine, but also, above all, an obedient warrior capable of working closely with the Roman soldiers. A dog that could be called to battle and, upon hearing a command, would attack without hesitation, but also knew when to retreat when the situation demanded it. The canis pugnax that emerged from this breeding was everything the Romans had dreamed of. It was massive, with an impressive height of about 60 centimeters and a weight ranging from 40 to 50 kilograms, almost entirely composed of firm, robust muscles. Its jaw was so powerful it could break bones with a single bite. The short, dark coat helped camouflage it at night, making it an even more intimidating presence for the enemies. And the bark, the deep, threatening sound of the canis pugnax not only instilled fear in any adversary, but also served as a warning. The enemy was about to be dominated. Moreover, its ability to attack in groups or in a coordinated manner was one of the Romans' greatest advantages. The canis pugnax didn't act alone. When sent into battle, it worked with other dogs, attacking in synchronized groups to cause as much disorder as possible within enemy lines. The Roman strategy was clear: confuse, disorient, and destroy any resistance. However, the canis pugnax wasn't just a machine of destruction. It also played a crucial role in ensuring the safety of the Roman legions. The dogs were used as sentinels and, during sieges, as an impenetrable line of defense against any intruders. They patrolled the camps, ensured that enemies didn't get too close, and even helped track down deserters or spies, whose movements were quickly detected by the dog's sharp instincts. The Romans, as always, did not view the canis pugnax merely as a war dog. They saw it as a true ally, a symbol of loyalty and strength. And when witnessing one of these dogs in action on the battlefield, it was impossible not to recognize the power these animals brought, a power that was intimately tied to the greatness of the Roman Empire itself. The canis pugnax was not just a product of Roman ingenuity, but also proof of their unmatched ability to turn any challenge into a victory. At the heart of the Roman Empire, where military victories relied not only on human strategy, but also on raw strength and unbreakable discipline, the canis pugnax stood out as one of the greatest allies of Roman soldiers. Its impressive physical build was a direct reflection of the need for a war dog that was both formidable and efficient on the battlefield. Imagine, for a moment, a creature walking alongside the Roman legions, imposing, with a height of about 60 centimeters at the withers, a size that gave it an undeniable presence. Its weight, ranging between 40 and 50 kilograms, was pure muscle, without excess, but with enough strength to face any adversary. The canis pugnax was not just a dog with a threatening appearance. It possessed a unique combination of speed and strength, making it a versatile ally in combat. Its massive, powerful jaw could crush bones with ease, a true testament to the brutality and effectiveness of this animal in warfare. Any Roman soldier who saw a canis pugnax approaching knew what was coming: an unrelenting attack by a creature that had the power to tear apart its prey with a single blow. The canis pugnax's coat, short and dark, was designed for military function, making it difficult to spot during nighttime battles. The Romans knew that war didn't only take place during the day, and their dog's ability to fight effectively at night or in low-visibility environments was vital. The dark coat also provided a strategic advantage, camouflaging the dog as it moved alongside Roman troops. But the canis pugnax didn't rely only on its physical strength. Its deep, terrifying bark also served a psychological function on the battlefield. It was a sound that heralded destruction, a warning to any enemy that war was about to begin. The bark not only disturbed enemy troops, but also served to coordinate the dog's attacks, synchronizing its movements with the military precision that defined the Roman Empire. The physical strength of the canis pugnax was intimately connected to its role in combat. It was not just a symbol of power, it was a war machine designed to intimidate, disorient, and defeat any enemy who dared to challenge Rome. When the Romans created it, they had designed the perfect war dog, an animal whose size, strength, and skill were as feared as the legions themselves. With immense stamina, the canis pugnax followed the legions for thousands of miles, helping protect soldiers during marches and playing crucial roles in battles. Its size and strength were enough to overpower almost any opponent, making it one of the greatest weapons of the Roman Empire, feared as much as the Roman swords and shields themselves. To look at a canis pugnax, the enemy saw more than just a dog. They saw a real threat, a presence capable of turning the tide of war in favor of Rome. The creation of the canis pugnax was no accident, nor a simple attempt to breed the strongest dogs. It was a masterpiece of Roman military genetic engineering, a meticulous and deliberate effort to create the perfect war machine. The selection of dogs for this purpose required a keen eye for detail, as the Romans knew that a failure in this process could cost them precious victories on the battlefield. First, the Romans focused on the essential qualities for combat. They sought dogs that, in addition to being large and strong, had unique characteristics: physical endurance, intelligence, unconditional loyalty, and an obedient nature. Only the most robust dogs with a balanced temperament were chosen for breeding, because loyalty and emotional control were as important as raw strength on the battlefield. Dogs that showed any signs of fear, indecision, or uncontrolled aggression were discarded without hesitation. The Roman Empire needed dogs that not only attacked on instinct, but followed clear and precise orders during combat. The selection wasn't limited to physical appearance or strength. The Romans focused primarily on mental and training abilities. Puppies that showed ease in learning complex commands and following quick directions were the most valued. The training process began early, with puppies exposed to the military environment from a very young age. They were taught to recognize battle sounds, familiarize themselves with the tension of the battlefield, and most importantly, to follow their trainers' orders with military precision. This training wasn't just about obedience, but also about making the dogs develop a natural ability to work alongside Roman soldiers. A canis pugnax could not be a solitary warrior. It needed to be part of a coordinated force, moving as a cohesive unit alongside the legionaries. The dogs were taught to fight in groups, attacking enemies with a precision that reflected the impeccable organization of the Roman legions. This process of genetic enhancement and training is what gave rise to what we now know as the canis pugnax, a war dog that not only possessed immense strength, but also a disciplined mind, capable of following orders and acting strategically. The combination of strength, intelligence, and loyalty made the canis pugnax an unparalleled ally, both in battle and in the security of the legions. The Romans' ability to create and train these dogs wasn't just a matter of military necessity, but a demonstration of how much they were willing to invest in their victories. The canis pugnax was more than just a pet or guard dog. It was a vital part of the Roman war machine, meticulously designed to be a force of destruction and a symbol of discipline and power, reflecting the empire itself in its essence. When war took a pause and the struggle for supremacy became a spectacle, the canis pugnax showed its other face, the face of brutal entertainment in the Roman arenas. The Colosseum, the grandest and most magnificent stage for battles in the Roman Empire, was not only a place for gladiators to face death. It was also the setting where war dogs demonstrated their strength and loyalty in a completely different way. Fights involving the canis pugnax were immensely popular among the Romans. However, these dogs didn't only face other wild animals like lions and bears, they also fought gladiators and prisoners of war. The spectacle was a bloody and fierce event, where the audience watched with excitement as these dogs, trained for mortal combat, attacked their prey with terrifying precision. The Romans loved these battles, not just for the pleasure of violence, but for the representation of indomitable power that the canis pugnax symbolized. But the war dogs were not just animals of battle. They were also a representation of Rome's military power. Their presence in the arenas didn't just show the brutality of the empire, but also its ability to control and dominate even the fiercest animals. When a canis pugnax entered the arena, it carried with it the strength of the empire itself. Its fight wasn't just against gladiators or wild beasts. It was against any form of resistance, any challenge to Roman dominance. These dogs were considered true warriors, and the battles involving them were seen as displays of strength, loyalty, and courage. The sound of the canis pugnax's bark, its menacing march, and the snap of its jaws as it attacked were moments of pure tension, and the Roman audience felt that the fate of anyone who dared enter the arena with them was inevitable. For the soldiers and Romans in general, the victories of dogs in the arenas were proof of their military superiority. When a canis pugnax defeated a gladiator or a wild beast, it wasn't just a triumph for the animal, it was a triumph for Rome. The empire showed the world once again that its forces, human or canine, were unbeatable. These battles also served as a form of propaganda, a reminder to everyone about the relentless nature of Rome and the power of its soldiers and allies, whether human or animal. The spectacle of the Roman arenas, with their bloody and immortal combats, only reinforced Rome's legacy as an empire that knew no limits in its pursuit of domination. At the end of each fight, when the canis pugnax won, the crowd applauded not only the animal, but the strength of the empire represented there. These war dogs, far from being mere instruments of destruction, became living symbols of Rome's greatness, celebrated for their courage both in battle and in the arena. And so, the canis pugnax solidified itself not only as a war dog, but as an icon of Roman culture, fierce, loyal, and unbeatable. In Rome, the spectacle of death wasn't reserved solely for the arenas or battlefields. There was also a cruel and visually striking method of public punishment, where war dogs were used as executioners. The arenas, where gladiators fought to the death, were places of entertainment. But when death needed to be imposed as a warning, the setting was different. Public executions of prisoners and criminals were among the empire's most brutal and spectacular events. Imagine the scene, the central square, filled with Roman citizens eager to witness the punishment of a traitor, a war prisoner, or a convicted criminal. The condemned, bound, and vulnerable is thrown into the center of the arena, where their fate is sealed not by swords, but by sharp teeth and relentless jaws. The canis pugnax, with their dark coats and muscular bodies, are released into the vicinity of the victim. These dogs, fierce and disciplined, needed no further commands. They knew exactly what to do. As the dogs advanced toward the condemned, the crowd quieted, aware that this was more than just an execution. It was an affirmation of Roman power over life and death. The jaws of the canis pugnax could break bones with ease, and in a few seconds, the prisoner had no chance of escape. Death didn't come just from the dog's physical strength, but from the psychological terror they caused before attacking. The sound of their fierce barks and their heavy paws hitting the ground were signals of an inevitable end. The crowd watched in silence or with excitement as the brutal execution unfolded before them. Beyond punishment, these executions had a symbolic character. They were a display of authority, a message to all who watched. Disobedience, betrayal, or crime against Rome would result in an end as brutal as that inflicted by war dogs. Execution by dogs was associated with ultimate humiliation, where there was no dignity in death. The criminal would not die in battle as a warrior, but would be torn apart, consumed by the relentless force of an animal trained for war. The dogs didn't just serve to kill. They were also a reminder that Roman order was absolute. The extermination of a man, or even a traitorous soldier, by the dogs was a demonstration that even humans, with all their skill and strategy, could be reduced to nothing in the face of brute natural force. The image of a canis pugnax bringing down a condemned person became part of the Roman collective imagination, reinforcing fear and respect for imperial authority. While these events are remembered as forms of sadistic entertainment, they also represented the darker side of Roman discipline and power. The canis pugnax were not just war dogs and defenders, they were instruments of justice, as the Romans saw them. Their actions and executions were not viewed with sadness or compassion, but as an extension of the order and harsh punishment that kept the empire running. In a world where brutality was part of everyday life, even death was a display of power. In an ancient Rome where the image of power was carefully cultivated, every element of the empire was used to reinforce the idea of supremacy, control, and invincibility. The canis pugnax, with their unshakable strength and relentless loyalty, were not just a military weapon or a companion in battle. They became a symbol of Rome, a propaganda tool designed to communicate to the world the empire's power, its ability to conquer and subjugate, and its relentless pursuit of domination. In mosaics, statues, and inscriptions, the Romans depicted the canis pugnax not only as war dogs, but as almost mythical creatures, whose deeds in battle were elevated to a nearly heroic status. Every bark, every attack, was portrayed with such grandeur that the dogs became figures of worship, symbols not only of animal strength, but of Roman strength. They became, in some way, the embodiment of Rome itself, invincible, tireless, and utterly loyal. These artistic representations were more than simple praise for the dogs. They served a political purpose. By placing the canis pugnax as figures of power, Roman authorities weren't just celebrating the usefulness of these dogs. They were showing the world that Rome was not alone in its quest for domination, that its strength was all-encompassing. Even its dogs were designed to subjugate and win. In mosaics, a canis pugnax was shown defeating fierce opponents, whether other animals or human enemies. With their jaws open, ready to attack, they symbolized the brutality and effectiveness of the empire. The inscriptions found in the ruins of Rome often carried phrases of praise, such as loyalty and strength, or Rome, the unbeatable. The presence of war dogs in these artifacts wasn't just a display of respect for the animals, but a reaffirmation that Rome, as an empire, was unparalleled. The images of dogs in battle armor, prepared for combat, were among the most impressive and powerful representations of imperial propaganda. The arenas also served as a stage for this kind of propaganda. With each battle between canis pugnax and enemies, the empire not only displayed the skill of its soldiers and war machines, but also showed the world that even in moments of entertainment, Rome ruled, creating a spectacle that attracted both Romans and the peoples of conquered lands. The image of an unbeatable dog wasn't just to excite the Romans, but to leave a lasting mark on the peoples watching. A subliminal message that any enemy who challenged Rome, human or animal, would meet the same fate. These dogs thus became symbols of a Rome that, even in its darkest moments, controlled everything around it. The canis pugnax, loyal and relentless, wasn't just a war machine. It was an emblem of Roman power, a constant reminder that Rome's supremacy was present in every part of the empire's life. Even the dogs were imposing, allies, and symbols of an empire that knew no defeat. As the Roman Empire expanded, crossing borders and conquering distant lands, the canis pugnax played a vital role, not only in battle but also in maintaining order and security in newly conquered territory. The war dogs were used to ensure that new territories stayed under control and that Roman legions weren't caught off guard in unfamiliar and often hostile environments. When Rome advanced into Gaul or the colonies in Britain, the soldiers faced not only the resistance of local tribes, but also the challenge of vast forests and unexplored terrain. Here, the canis pugnax showed their strategic importance. With their tracking abilities, they were able to detect enemy movements, ambushes, and even identify traitor allies or deserters. The dog's keen sense of smell helped the Romans avoid traps and maintain an advantage over the natives. In the conquest zones, the canis pugnax were not only useful for direct combat, but also played a crucial role in surveillance and security. At night, when the soldiers retired to their camps, the dogs patrolled the perimeter, alerting to any suspicious movement. This constant and vigilant presence gave the Romans a sense of security, especially in territories where trust in the local population was uncertain. Throughout the campaigns, the dog's ability to track and follow orders became an essential part of military logistics. They were used to run from one camp to another, carrying important messages with the precision of a human messenger, but much faster. The war dogs, with their endurance and ability to endure long journeys, covered vast distances without hesitation, carrying crucial orders during campaigns, always with the tireless loyalty that the Romans so valued. The impact of the canis pugnax also extended to controlling pacified territories. When Rome took control of a new city or region, the dogs were often used to help establish the Roman presence unmistakably. They patrolled the streets, terrorizing the local inhabitants and making it clear that any attempt at revolt would be met with the force and ferocity of the war dogs. It was also during these military expeditions that the canis pugnax demonstrated how they had become an extension of Roman identity. In many of the conquered lands, the Romans would display their dogs as symbols of power and dominance. The mere appearance of a canis pugnax on the battlefield was enough to spread terror in the enemy ranks. No matter how far they were from the capital, the dogs always reinforced Rome's presence. In Caesar's time, when the Roman legions advanced deeper into Gaul and beyond, the canis pugnax did more than hunt enemies or track deserters. They also helped cement Roman control over these lands. They became crucial allies in the conquest of new frontiers, not just in terms of brute force, but also as visible symbols of the omnipresence of the Roman Empire. The loyalty and ferocity of these dogs, allies of the Romans in military campaigns, were instrumental in expanding Rome's power. The training of the canis pugnax was not just a physical process, but also a matter of patience, discipline, and strategy. Rome, with its military grandeur, knew that every part of the empire, every soldier, every piece of equipment, and even every dog, had to be forged in the same school of rigidity and obedience. Just as the legions were rigorously trained, the war dogs followed an unrelenting discipline. The dogs began their training from a young age, being carefully selected not only for their strength, but also for their ability to learn and obey. Puppies from weaker lineages, or those prone to impulsive behavior, were discarded. Only the fiercest, most intelligent, and obedient dogs were chosen to be part of Rome's war machine. The first steps in training involved socialization and the development of trust. The dogs were exposed to the military environment, becoming accustomed to the sounds of battle, the shouts of soldiers, and the orders echoing through the Roman ranks. From an early age, the puppies were taught to recognize the Roman soldiers as their leaders, creating a bond of loyalty that would last a lifetime. This deep connection between the dog and its trainer made the animal not just a warrior, but an extension of the soldier himself. As the dogs grew, their training became more specific. The canis pugnax were taught to follow military commands with precision. When a legionary shouted, "Advance," the dog knew it had to run ahead, ready to attack or sniff out the enemy. Every movement had to be executed with synchronization, without hesitation or fear. Combat techniques were also taught meticulously. The dogs were trained to attack strategically, biting the legs of enemy horses or charging against enemy formations with immense force. They learned to identify the enemy and how to destabilize them effectively. Each dog became a master in the art of war, mimicking the discipline of the Roman soldiers themselves. Another crucial aspect of training was the development of physical endurance. Roman war dogs were forced to cover long distances, crossing fields and mountains alongside the Roman legions. Like the troops, they needed to be able to withstand heat, cold, hunger, and thirst. Exhausting training sessions were conducted, where the dogs ran for miles carrying small loads to build their strength and stamina. Additionally, during training, the dogs were constantly exposed to simulated combat situations. Roman soldiers, with their shields and swords, participated in training exercises with the dogs, helping them get used to the chaos and tension of battle. They learned to distinguish between friends and enemies in the midst of the turmoil, a vital skill that made them even more effective during real confrontations. This training was relentless. The canis pugnax never had a true moment of rest, always being prepared for extreme situations. The loyalty and ferocity of Roman dogs were a direct result of this tireless dedication. They were not just combat animals, they were disciplined warriors with a clear mission and a single goal: to serve Rome until the end. The training of a canis pugnax was not just a military task. It was, in fact, preparation for a life of combat, a sacrifice that the Roman war dogs accepted without question. They knew, just like the legions, that the only option was victory, because defeat was not an option in the Roman Empire. In the heart of the Roman Empire, where order was the foundation of greatness, there was no room for failure, and this applied as much to the men as it did to the dogs. Discipline and obedience were the qualities that defined both the Roman soldiers and the canis pugnax. For the Romans, war was not just a physical struggle, but a matter of strategy, control, and precision. Therefore, the dogs could not just be fierce. They needed to be incredibly disciplined and capable of executing orders flawlessly. These dogs were not driven solely by instinct. They had the ability to distinguish commands given by their trainers, following them to the letter, even in the chaos of battle. Obedience was a reflection of the deep connection between the dog and its trainer. When a commander gave an order, he knew that the canis pugnax would execute it with the same precision as an experienced legionary. This harmony between man and animal was crucial to the success of military campaigns, where every move needed to be calculated and coordinated. Unlike wild dogs or animals used by barbarian tribes, which attacked based on instinct, the canis pugnax were trained to know when and how to attack. If a soldier shouted "advance," the dog advanced without hesitation, attacking the designated target. If the command was "withdraw," the dog knew to retreat immediately, without question. Every order had a clear meaning, and the dog's response was always immediate and precise. The most remarkable part of this was that the dogs, in their blind loyalty, never needed to be forced to carry out their orders. They were so immersed in Roman military discipline that obedience seemed natural. This obedience was not limited to battles. In the training fields, the dogs were taught to perform various tasks, all based on specific commands. If a general wanted his dog to scout an area for enemies, the dog knew exactly what to do, never straying from its mission. If it was necessary to track a potential ambush, the dog followed the scent with precision, guiding the soldiers to safety. In all cases, the canis pugnax demonstrated an absolute commitment to their roles, largely due to the intense discipline and training. The ability to remain calm under pressure was one of the most impressive traits of these dogs. In the midst of battle, where the sound of clashing swords and the shouts of soldiers could disorient even the most experienced, the canis pugnax maintained their composure. This was only possible because, from a young age, they were accustomed to the noise and chaos of the battlefield. Every sound, every explosion, every strange movement became part of their training, until the dog could focus solely on the command given. Additionally, the training included socializing with the Roman soldiers, which helped strengthen the bond between dog and man. The canis pugnax could distinguish between the friendly soldier and the enemy. If a command was given for an attack, the dog would not hesitate to strike the opponent with precision. If a friendly soldier was wounded, the dog could be instructed to alert its comrades or even protect the injured, demonstrating a sensitivity that went beyond its animal nature. This obedience, however, was not blind obedience. There was an intelligence trained into the dogs, which could be seen in the way they adapted to situations. If something unexpected occurred during combat, the dogs could make quick decisions based on signals from their trainers. This demonstrated not only obedience but also the mutual trust between the dog and the Roman soldiers, a trust built through years of rigorous training. The discipline and obedience of the canis pugnax were the foundations that supported their effectiveness in battle. Without these qualities, these dogs would not have been able to play their role as instruments of power in the Roman military machine. In the Roman Empire, where order and strategy were crucial for success, these dogs became indispensable allies, not just for their physical strength, but for their ability to follow commands with the precision and loyalty that define a true warrior. The Roman legions faced long marches in difficult terrain, crossing mountains and forests, and the challenge was even greater for the dogs that accompanied them. These four-legged warriors were not just symbols of power and discipline, but also living proof of the physical endurance that Rome required from its soldiers and allies. The journey was not easy. Under the scorching desert heat or the biting cold of the northern lands, the legions and their dogs walked tirelessly, facing natural obstacles and hidden enemies. The physical endurance of the canis pugnax was a testament to the adaptation and training they underwent. During the march, the dogs were forced to cover hundreds of kilometers without rest, enduring the harshness of the environment. Yet, they not only kept up with the legions but often outpaced them. Their ability to traverse the dry and mountainous terrain with ease made them essential for patrols and reconnaissance missions. While the soldiers rested, the dogs kept going, sniffing the air for signs of enemies. The food and care were adequate, but the training demanded extra endurance. It wasn't just about physical strength. The dogs were taught to adapt to different climates, survive on less, and keep going without faltering. In the case of a siege, when food supplies were restricted, these dogs were fed only the bare minimum and still maintained the energy for battle. Their loyalty was not only psychological but physical as well. They were prepared to fight until their last breath, just like any Roman soldier, facing adversities that other animals could not withstand. In many campaigns, the Roman dogs were also used to hunt for food. When the troops advanced into unknown territories, the canis pugnax helped track wild animals, ensuring the soldiers had sustenance. Even when the legions were isolated, cut off from the empire's supplies, the dogs were crucial for survival. Their ability to track and capture wild animals ensured that troop morale was maintained, even in the most extreme situations. During battles, the dog's endurance was even more apparent. It was not uncommon for a canis pugnax, after fighting tirelessly during the day, to continue hunting and patrolling at night. They were used as sentries, staying alert and vigilant for any sign of danger, while the legions recovered from the exhaustion of combat. However, their endurance was not limited to the battlefield or the marches. In many instances, they were called upon to perform secondary tasks with the same determination. They carried important messages between units, ensured the security of the camps, and even protected the wounded during the night. The physical endurance of these dogs was not just about strength, but also character. They had been molded to endure the relentless conditions of a war that never gave respite. The Roman soldier, who knew what it was like to face the exhausting training and endless campaigns, could rely on the dog as his unbeatable companion. Together, man and animal faced the world in rare synchrony, where loyalty and endurance were the pillars that upheld the empire. In Commander's accounts, the importance of the dog's endurance is clearly acknowledged. One soldier, writing about the campaign on the Germanic borders, mentioned, "There is no army stronger than one that has alongside it creatures that can walk without rest, who face the cold without hesitation, who protect us while we rest." This was the reality of the canis pugnax during long journeys, relentless battles, and missions that required more than just strength. They demanded endurance, determination, and courage. The physical endurance of the dogs was an extension of Rome's own strength, a strength that never stopped, never gave in, and never surrendered. During military campaigns, when the Roman legions spread out over unfamiliar and often inhospitable territories, camp security was a priority. These camps were the vital base for the soldiers, where they rested, ate, and prepared for the next military move. In a world without advanced communication systems, and with the constant threat of ambushes, vigilance was key. To ensure nothing went unnoticed, the Romans relied on the vigilant presence of the canis pugnax, whose sharp senses and unmatched loyalty made them the perfect sentinels. As soon as the camp was set up, dogs were positioned at strategic points along the protective fences. The dogs' keen eyesight and acute sense of smell were unbeatable, making them essential for detecting any suspicious movement, whether from approaching enemies or deserters trying to flee. The Roman troops knew that if the dogs reacted, it was time to be alert. When a dog began barking or growling in the dark, it meant something was wrong, and the guard unit would immediately prepare to investigate or even attack. Training the dogs for this sentry role was rigorous. From a young age, the canis pugnax were accustomed to the sounds of battle, the noise of fighting, and even the stealthy movements of other soldiers or enemies. They learned to distinguish between natural sounds and those indicating danger. Every bark and reaction was closely monitored by the Roman commanders, who could trust the precision of the dog's behavior. Moreover, unlike other animals, the dogs had the advantage of patrolling the area without needing rest. During the night, when most soldiers were resting, the dogs continued their vigil, patrolling the camp's fences and sentinels without missing a single detail. In siege situations, or when the legions were camped near a dangerous area, the presence of the dogs became even more vital. They became the first line of defense against surprise invasions, alerting the Romans in time to react quickly and effectively. The dogs didn't just bark to scare off intruders, but also attacked with precision if anyone tried to breach the defense line. Their presence commanded respect and fear from the enemies, who knew that the dogs were ready to defend the camp until the last moment. Even in more peaceful moments, the dogs were always reliable. On some occasions, Roman commanders used the behavior of the dogs as a way to ensure the safety of a secret mission. If a dog showed an unusual reaction, it indicated that something out of the ordinary was happening. In many cases, this led the Romans to avoid ambushes and protect themselves before the enemies could attack. When the canis pugnax were in action, their loyalty and skills became part of the Roman military strategy. In the heat of battle or the calm of the night, their presence on the field symbolized not only the security of the camps, but also the trust that Rome placed in their canine companions. For the Romans, the peace of a quiet night in camp was not just the absence of danger, but the confidence that their dogs were there, ready to protect and alert, making them inseparable allies in the pursuit of the empire's supremacy. Despite their strategic and practical importance, the Roman war dogs were rarely mentioned in detail in the historical sources of the time. The chronicles of Rome were mostly focused on the great victories of the legions, the brilliant strategies of generals, and the conquests of the empire. Names like Julius Caesar, Pompey, and Augustus dominated the accounts, while common soldiers and the animals that assisted them remained in the shadows, invisible to the eyes of historians. However, this does not mean that war dogs were less important. The Romans knew the value of these animals, and, as in the case of the dogs honored with tombs and inscriptions, their loyalty was widely recognized. But in Roman historical literature, dogs were not often highlighted as agents of war or as symbols of military greatness. The focus was always on human figures, strategies, and the battles that shaped the history of the empire. As a result, many details about the lives of Roman war dogs and their contributions were lost over time. Interestingly, the lack of written accounts about Roman dogs only fueled the mystery surrounding their role. There were few records about how they were trained, how they were chosen, or the impact they had on battles. However, archaeological remnants such as mosaics, inscriptions, and even remains of tombs told a different story, one that survived through the centuries. These fragments, often simple, are the tangible evidence of a deep relationship between the Romans and their dogs, a bond that transcended the battlefields. Archaeologists, while excavating ancient Roman cities and historical battle sites, found artifacts that, although not detailed accounts, offered a unique insight into the use of dogs. In Pompeii, for example, some mosaics reveal dogs being used to protect property or for hunting. In other locations, evidence suggests that dogs were a constant presence in homes and urban areas, always fulfilling their role as guardians or hunting companions. And in military campaigns, as shown in some tombs and inscriptions, Roman war dogs were often mentioned symbolically, representing the bravery and loyalty that the Romans valued so highly. Additionally, stories of legendary dogs, like those that protected their legions during crucial battles, survived through popular tales and oral traditions. Even without an official historical record, these accounts were passed down from generation to generation, keeping the memory of Roman dogs alive and their role in the empire's conquests. However, the lack of written sources does not diminish the importance that dogs had in building Rome as a military power. In silence, they remained by the soldiers' sides, with their paws firmly planted on the ground of every conquest, representing the trust and protection that the Roman Republic and Empire demanded from their most loyal allies. Thus, while the official history of Rome was recorded in the great books of strategy, the canine figures remained in the shadows, guarding the secrets of the empire in every step they took, every battle they faced, and every territory they helped to conquer. In the vast Roman Empire, where the control of conquered territories was vital to ensuring stability and expansion, the ability to track enemies or deserters became a crucial tool for the armies. When the Romans advanced into new regions, war dogs, especially the canis pugnax, were essential in performing patrol and tracking tasks. Armed with an unparalleled sense of smell, these dogs were not only combat companions, but also vigilant, tireless sentinels, ready to detect any lurking threat. The Romans, when faced with unfamiliar and often hostile terrain, realized that the dog's ability to follow scents could be strategically used to ensure the safety of the legions. When it came to tracking enemies or capturing deserters, the dogs were indispensable. With their ability to sniff out the trail of people, they could follow the scent of any human, whether an enemy on the run or a soldier who had abandoned their ranks. And that was not all. The dogs also played an important role in tracking supplies, such as food or ammunition, often vital for the survival of the legions in long campaigns. The strategy of using dogs as patrollers and trackers proved especially effective in challenging lands, such as Gaul or Britannia, where the rough terrain and dense vegetation made troop mobility difficult. In such regions, the dogs could traverse areas where soldiers struggled to move. They advanced with speed and agility, guiding the legions through treacherous areas and ensuring that any suspicious movement was detected before it became an imminent threat. When a patrol of dogs was sent on a mission, their presence guaranteed that any enemy hidden nearby would be quickly identified. If a Roman soldier fled or tried to desert, the dogs immediately followed their trail, alerting the legion commanders and allowing for a quick reaction. This not only prevented mass desertions, but also stopped valuable information from falling into enemy hands. The training of the dogs for this role was rigorous. From a young age, the dogs were exposed to different conditions and tracking scenarios, learning to distinguish human scents from those of horses or other animals that could be confused during a mission. They were trained to track accurately, without being distracted by other stimuli, and to identify the scent of a person from hundreds of meters away, something that became a crucial strategic advantage in Roman warfare. The war dogs also played an important role in campaigns involving the capture of enemies hiding in forests or mountains. For example, when Rome faced Celtic tribes in the forests of Gaul, the use of dogs to track enemy positions was decisive. Often, these dogs would locate ambush points or hideouts where the enemies were camouflaged, allowing the Romans to position themselves advantageously for an attack. Not just war dogs, but also other dogs used for hunting or patrolling contributed to the stability of the empire. In times of peace or situations where vigilance was needed, the dogs continued their work, sniffing out any sign of disturbance or threat. In highly trafficked areas, such as the borders of the empire or regions under threat of invasions, patrol dogs were put into action constantly, ensuring that the legions were always prepared for defense. Over time, the Romans realized that combining military discipline with the natural skills of war dogs created a formidable synergy. The canis pugnax were not just a line of defense or a tool of combat, but an extension of the legions, capable of expanding the reach of each mission and providing security in unfamiliar territories. These dogs became, in fact, the sentinels of the empire, whose tracking and patrolling abilities were vital to the success of Roman military campaigns. The Roman Empire was a war machine and administrative powerhouse that spanned vast territories, from the scorching sands of North Africa to the dense forests of Germania. To maintain control over these lands, the Romans built fortresses, outposts, and walls along their borders. In these defensive structures, guard dogs played a crucial role, serving as loyal and relentless sentinels against invaders, thieves, and potential deserters. The Romans used robust dog breeds, such as the canis pugnax, to patrol the walls and protect military supplies. These dogs were trained to sniff out intruders and react immediately to any attempt at invasion or sabotage. During the night, while the soldiers rested, the dogs remained alert, patrolling the perimeter of the fortresses, ready to attack anyone who approached without permission. Their keen sense of smell allowed them to detect strange presences long before the human guards noticed any suspicious movement. On the most dangerous borders of the empire, such as Hadrian's Wall in Britain or the Germanic Limes, where hostile tribes frequently tested Roman strength, the dogs were irreplaceable allies. When Roman sentries suspected enemy movements in the dark, releasing the dogs would ensure they chased down any invader attempting to breach the empire's barriers. Their presence commanded respect and fear, often deterring attacks before they even began. In addition to guarding fortresses, the dogs also kept watch over supplies and the army's horses. Any attempt to steal supplies or horses could jeopardize the survival of troops on campaign, and the dogs were trained to attack any stranger who approached these areas. They were especially useful in the temporary camps of the legions, where vigilance was crucial to avoid surprise attacks during the night. Roman guard dogs were not just fierce and disciplined animals, they also formed strong bonds with their handlers, creating a level of loyalty that made them even more effective. There are reports of dogs staying by their fallen masters on the battlefield, guarding their bodies until the last moment. In some regions of the empire, Roman soldiers even buried their dogs with honors, recognizing their importance in defending the fortifications and protecting the legions. Over time, the use of guard dogs became a military tradition, adopted by other civilizations after the fall of Rome. However, it was at the height of the empire that these dogs showed their full potential, ensuring that the Roman borders remained secure from external threats. Thus, the guard dogs were not just simple animals, but faithful guardians of one of the greatest empires in history. The Romans recognized the value of the dogs serving the military, fortifications, and even noble families. They were seen not only as utility animals, but as loyal companions, whose bravery and dedication deserved recognition even after death. For many soldiers and citizens, losing a loyal dog was as painful as losing a friend or a brother in arms. In the Roman legions, when a canis pugnax died in service, its body was not simply discarded. In many cases, soldiers performed symbolic ceremonies to honor their canine companion. Some funerary inscriptions found by archaeologists show moving epitaphs dedicated to these war dogs. On one tomb discovered in Gaul, for example, it read, "Here lies the tireless guardian, who never hesitated in the face of danger, and whose heart was more loyal than many men's." On some occasions, dogs that performed extraordinary feats in battle were buried alongside their masters, especially if both had fallen in the same battle. This was a sign of respect, as it was believed that the bond between them should continue in the afterlife. There are records of dogs being buried with their collars, bowls, and even small statues representing their form in life. In addition to military dogs, those serving in the estates of aristocrats and wealthy families also received funerary honors. Some tombs of Roman patricians include inscriptions mentioning their pet dogs, especially those who showed bravery in defending their homes. Mosaics and funerary sculptures often depicted dogs alongside their owners, symbolizing their eternal loyalty. One of the most notable practices found among some legions was the cremation rite for war dogs. In certain situations, especially during long campaigns where burial was not possible, the Romans would make small funeral pyres for their fallen dogs. The ashes were collected and, if time and safety allowed, taken to an appropriate resting place. In the writings of Roman historians such as Columella and Pliny, there are references to the importance of dogs, not only in life but also in death. Pliny, for example, mentioned that certain generals gave speeches in honor of their bravest dogs, a custom that reinforced the connection between soldiers and their loyal protectors. This respect for dogs was not just a sentimental trait of the Romans, but a demonstration of how these animals were an integral part of the empire's military and social structure. Their legacy did not fade with their death. On the contrary, their deeds were remembered, immortalized in stone and writing, ensuring that their stories would survive through the centuries. The Roman Empire fell, but the war dogs it helped shape continued to leave their mark throughout the centuries. The canis pugnax, the fierce and loyal Roman war dog, did not disappear with the fall of the legions. Its lineage was preserved, and its influence can still be seen today in several modern breeds. Among the direct descendants of this formidable war dog are the Neapolitan Mastiff and the Cane Corso, both known for their strength, loyalty, and protective instincts. These dogs inherited not only the physical stature of their Roman ancestors, but also their disciplined temperament and unwavering courage. For centuries, they were used for guarding, hunting, and even as war dogs in conflicts after the fall of Rome. In addition to genetic heritage, the legacy of Roman dogs manifested in military tactics and the very concept of dogs as allies in war. During the Middle Ages, feudal lords and European armies continued to employ dogs in battles and for castle protection, a strategy directly inherited from the Roman legions. The Normans, for instance, used dogs to patrol fortresses and intimidate invaders, something the Romans had done centuries earlier. The cultural impact of Roman dogs was also reflected in art and literature. Mosaics, sculptures, and inscriptions found in ruins scattered throughout the ancient empire's territory still show dogs in scenes of war and hunting, perpetuating the image of these faithful four-legged warriors. Medieval writers mentioned the war dogs of ancient Rome with admiration, and the idea of a loyal and protective dog was reinforced in European myths and legends. Even in modern times, the concept of dogs in military and police missions follows the same principle established by the Romans. Dogs trained for search, rescue, bomb detection, and patrol are an evolution of what the legions did over 2,000 years ago. Discipline, obedience, and rigorous training are practices that began with the canis pugnaces and continue to this day. In the end, the legacy of Roman dogs is not just a matter of lineage or tactical influence. It is a testament to the unbreakable bond between man and dog, an alliance forged in war, solidified in loyalty, and immortalized in history. And so, the war dogs of ancient Rome left a legacy that crossed the centuries, shaping breeds, strategies, and even the way we see dogs today. From fierce warriors to loyal companions, their presence was essential to the Roman Empire and remains alive in history. Now I want to hear your thoughts. Did you know about the importance of dogs in ancient Rome? Which part of the story surprised you the most? Leave your comment below. I'd love to know what you think. Oh, and if you liked this video, don't forget to hit the like button because it really helps me continue bringing more content like this. And of course, if you're not subscribed yet, go ahead and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any Roman world curiosities. See you in the next video.